Leaps of evolution. The new theory of the evolution of the living world that I have developed shows that evolution occurs in leaps and stagnations and not evenly, as Charles Darwin's theory suggests. Evolution occurs somewhat differently than Charles Darwin discovered. Darwin wrote the book The Origin of Species, in which he described the formation of new species of living beings through natural selection as a result of the struggle for existence. Darwin's theory shows that evolution proceeds step by step, constantly, and more or less evenly. In fact, evolution has occurred in leaps and bounds following catastrophes that have occurred throughout history. This is confirmed by archaeological evidence. Genetic variability goes both in the direction of increasing the viability of living beings and in the direction of decreasing their viability. The simultaneous appearance of genetic changes occurs among a small number of individuals, perhaps even one against the background of a large number of the previous species. And these changes were most likely smoothing out and erasing as a result of cross fertilization and competitive struggle between individuals. The emergence and survival of intermediate species require special conditions, which I will report on a little later. It is the fact of the extinction of all intermediate species and varieties of any branch of the genealogical tree proves that it is intermediate species and varieties were weaker in natural selection not only from the current species, but also from their original species, but which have survived and remain until now. The very result of natural evolution have proven that the original species, contrary to Charles Darwin's theory, were stronger in natural selection than the intermediate varieties and species formed by them later. It was the intermediate species and varieties, despite their weakness in natural selection, were the necessary intermediate links without which there could be no transition to stronger and more stable species. Such evolution, which took place with weaker intermediate species than their original species, could only be in the absence of a stronger opponent in the territory of change at that time. Such a state could only exist under special conditions when there was a sufficiently large territory free from stronger organisms, including their predecessors, which could compete with the intermediate species. This territory should have had enough space for both the previous original species and the mutants, and in which they could develop calmly and freely without struggle. This state of such a free territory should have been maintained for a long time. The free area must be sufficient to accommodate all the modified individuals, which will reproduce throughout the required time in geometric progression. Where could such large free areas used in my proof come from? They could only have existed when the earth was not yet populated by these and other stronger species, or they could have been formed after catastrophes that took place on Earth. That is, the intermediate species were a weakened temporary bridge through which evolution jumped, but without which it could not proceed quickly enough. It also contains the answer to the poor archaeological heritage of intermediate species. Such problems in explaining the reasons for the absence of fossil remains of some intermediate species of living beings led me to discover a completely different picture of passing evolution on Earth. I don't question Darwin's theory, but in the picture described by Charles Darwin, evolution could have proceeded according to very complicated schemes. The time for evolutionary changes to occur would have been much longer, perhaps 100, 1,000, or even 1,000,000 times more times longer. I hope you can note that there is a lot of newness in my works that cannot be found in other works. Thank you very much for your interest to my works. Please subscribe to my blogs by clicking on the circle under the picture. This will help you to learn about completely new things in the future.